Hello, everyone. It's so good to see you here on this beautiful day at Georgetown University. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Kim Daniels, and I am the director of the Initiative on Catholic Social Thought and Public Life here at Georgetown. Our mission is to bring the principles of Catholic social teaching to national and global conversations, to build bridges across political and religious and ideological lines, and to help a new generation of young people see their Catholic faith as central to their life and work. I want to welcome you all here for this wonderful dialogue we have on deck with us tonight on Catholic women's leadership to advance the common good. We have so many wonderful women here in the audience with us, Catholic women leaders from around the United States, and what a wonderful group we have here up on the dais, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them here in a minute. We're very grateful to our co-sponsors from the Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs. And I want to remind you that we'll be taking questions from the audience later. And please share your thoughts on social media using the hashtag Women's Leadership CST and by tagging GUCST Public Life and GU Berkeley Center. So with that, let's get started. I want to say that, of course, church teaching has consistently acknowledged the equal baptismal dignity of women and men and the importance of women's roles in public life. The life of the church reflects that reality. Catholic women lead major social service ministries, hospital systems, and major universities, among many other roles. Catholic sisters are on the front lines of living out our faith around the world and have since the beginning been serving the poor, caring for the sick, educating so many, and most of all leading in major institutional roles in our church. And of course, we know that Catholic women are the backbone of parish life here in the United States and around the world. Women's involvement in the church and in public life is critical to our mission and key to drawing in the next generation to our faith. Pope Francis recognized that, he says, women have kept the faith alive through their remarkable devotion and deep faith. And throughout the church's multi-year global consultation process called the Synod on Synodality, people from every continent at all stages of the process recognize the urgent need to give women greater leadership and decision-making roles in the church. Yet the Synod's final document, approved as authoritative by Pope Francis, recognizes that women continue to encounter obstacles to that leadership, and this harms the church's mission. Women's leadership is key to evangelization and mission, and young women need to know that their gifts are respected and valued, which means seeing more Catholic women in leadership roles. And while the Synod process and Pope Francis' steps forward represented real progress, at the same time, of course, there's so much more work to be done. We gather this evening aware, before we get started on our conversation, I need to recognize that we're in a world at war right now. Earlier this month, after an airstrike on Iran resulted in the death of over 150 schoolgirls, the Vatican daily newspaper published a haunting photo of the rows of their coffins with the stinging headline, "The Face of War." Tonight, as we pay tribute to women in the church, we honor their memory and all of those in conflict zones in particular. As the Synod's Continental Report for the Middle East noted, it is clear that the people of God in the Middle East are called to be witnesses to their faith through their life and their hope, despite the complexity of the present context. The call to renewal, to journey together, to dialogue, and to discernment is an urgency that admits of no postponement. We're aware that, of course, as Pope Leo has reminded us in recent days, we risk a tragedy of enormous proportions and the risk of an irreparable abyss if weapons are not laid down and dialogue does not prevail. So I'm sure you'll join me in praying for those who are at risk, those who suffer violence, those who are under threat of violence tonight. As we consider tonight the role of Catholic women in promoting the common good, we join our voices with theirs. And now I want to talk to you a little bit about the four remarkable leaders that we've gathered here on stage for this conversation tonight. First of all, Joanna Arellano-Gonzalez is the co-founder and director of training and formation at the Coalition for Spiritual and Public Leadership, a Catholic and Christian community organizing coalition that integrates liberation theology, spirituality, and grassroots organizing to advance community transformation. Cynthia Bailey Manns is the Director of Adult Learning at St. Joan of Arc Catholic Community in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and was one of 4 U.S. lay participants at the Synod on Synodality. Anne Thompson is an award-winning reporter with NBC News, a graduate of the University of Notre Dame. Don't hold that against her.
Don't hate
She covers the environment, economic issues, Pope Leo XIV, and the Catholic Church. And Sister Jane Wakahiu, LSOSF, is a member of the Little Sisters of St. Francis, Kenya. She provides leadership and direction of the Conrad Hilton Foundation's program development and oversees Hilton's remarkable Catholic Sisters Initiative. And so let me begin, as we get started here tonight, with an opening question for each one of you. And I'm going to start with you, Anne. After Pope Francis' historic efforts to promote women in leadership roles across the Vatican, and now with Pope Leo's papacy just beginning and taking shape in many ways, what do you see as the most important obstacles for women's leadership that still exist in the church, and the most important opportunities as well?
Do you have a couple of days? I thought I would answer this question by telling you a story. So when I was over there covering the death of Pope Francis and then the conclave, and a couple of days before the conclave got started, I was walking across St. Peter's Square, and I ran into one of the women that Pope Francis had elevated to a position of leadership. And we were chatting about what had happened and what was going on. And I asked her, I said, well, what do you expect? And there was this cloud of concern that came over her face. And she said, well, I don't know. It depends on what happens. And for me, that was like cold water in my face, because I realized at that moment that for all the efforts that Pope Francis had made to elevate women, how tenuous that was, how fragile that was. And if someone was elected Pope who wanted to turn the clock back, there was little that could be done about it. Years before, a very wise Vatican observer had told me that the most pushback that Pope Francis got on the changes that he tried to make were on his efforts to elevate women to position of leadership. But he did it anyways. Then a couple of days later, Pope Leo is elected. And the first thing I noticed was that when he celebrated Mass in the Sistine Chapel, his first Mass as Pope, the two lectors were women. And I thought, well, that's a good sign. And then he has since elevated Sister Mertelli to be Secretary of the Dicastery of Consecrated Life. So 2 out of the top 3 positions in that dicastery now are held by women. He also changed the rules so Sister Petrini, who is essentially the mayor of the Vatican City, would be able to continue on in that role. And just yesterday, if you saw on International Women's Day, he had 2 young girls serve as altar servers when he celebrated Mass in Rome. All of those are wonderful signs. But the thing that I take away from all of this is that women's leadership, the ground is being laid, but it's not cemented. Those positions are not cemented. It's not part of the tradition yet. So we have to nurture, we have to earn, and we must work every day to help cement that opportunity. And I think it's an opportunity that we're seeing more often than not. Kim and I just came from a conference 2 weeks ago in St. Paul, Minnesota, with some bishops. It's called The Way Forward. And easily half of the presenters at that conference were women. And the conference was about evangelizing in a digital age. And no one complained, no one raised an issue that half of them were women. The bishops listened. So I think there is change. I'm more optimistic than I ever have been, but there's, as you said, much more work to be done.
Much more to be done. Thanks, Anne. If we're even having that conversation, right?
Yep.
Thank you. That's terrific. How about you, Sister Jane? What do you think of as the most important obstacles, opportunities that women face in the church right now?
Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Anne, for laying the ground. For me, I would begin with Pope Francis. When I think of Pope Francis and the legacy of appointing women to leadership positions at the Vatican, it inspires me, it encourages me, because it opened a pathway for women to be recognized that they can contribute to the mission and the life of the church. And those women who have been appointed to those positions have not disappointed. They exemplify leadership, they exemplify compassion, and they walk alongside the people. And particularly, I would call out humility. I know several of them personally, Sister Natalie with us here. I know Sister Alessandra Simalili, Sister Simona Brombilia, Sister Teresa Manetti. So to me, to see women in those positions fulfills the work of the gospel, that I have come so that they may have life and have it to the full. That invitation to have life to the full was not for a specific group of people, but for all of us. We women can use their talent, gifts, and expertise in advancing the mission of the church. True, there remains much to be done, and our work is not over. But I see so many cultural barriers that prevent women to advancing to those positions, not just at the Vatican level, but sometimes in local dioceses. And the spirit of synodality is inviting us, let's work together. What is the gift you can offer to the church? Bring those gifts so that then we can all help work for the common good, to build a community that is thriving, to elevate the dignity of the human person, to walk in solidarity with each other, and to offer expertise for the preferential option for the poor. So I believe there is so much to be done, but we are on the right path. And Pope Leo, just a week ago, appointing Sister Blabiria now to serve also as a member of the Dicastery for Bishops, and Sister Nina Benedicta to serve as the deputy director for Vatican Press. It shows that the path is still open. We can work together in dialogue, simplicity, humility, and love. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sister Jane. How about you, Joanna? What do you see as the most important opportunities and the obstacles that are still in the way?
Thank you, Kim, and thank you for inviting me to be on this panel with these brilliant women and the brilliant women in the audience. I would say that the reality is that women make up more than half of the church, but for so long, women's voices and leadership has been unexplored, silenced, or invisibilized. And for me, that just means that the church's full potential hasn't yet been fully realized. And, I'm grateful for the papacy of Pope Francis and now Pope Leo, but I think we're all going to say, but there's a lot more work to be done. And I think about how critical of a role women have played since the foundation of our faith. And yet when we look at women throughout church history, we often see how their stories have been misinterpreted or misrepresented. And I think about how Mary continues to be portrayed as meek and passive when we can just look at the Magnificat and see just how radical and anti-imperial she is. And I think about how parishes would literally crumble without women managing the day-to-day ministries, yet have such little decision-making power. And so there's a disconnect between women doing a lot of the work and then having a say in how the work is done. And where I feel the Holy Spirit is moving us is a mass movement of women leading, preaching, organizing, where women's work is uplifted, where women's homilies are heard, where women have critical decision-making roles in co-creating the church that they want. And I see initiatives like Catholic Women Preach and Discerning Deacons really helping to steer the ship in the right direction. And that's a future that really excites me.
Thanks, Joanna. How about you, Cynthia? Tell us more about what you see as the obstacles and opportunities for women in the church.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I think one of the biggest obstacles is that still we have an unwillingness to admit the fact, the truth, that women's baptism is not inferior to men's baptism, and that women image Christ in their baptism. For many women, this causes a serious, deep spiritual wound because there are systems and processes and beliefs and practices in place where women feel constrained to honor their gifts and charisms and callings, to be a part of the people of God, the body of God. I think one of the great opportunities was the Synod, when women participated and had an opportunity to be in that space with all those men, which was quite frightening. And Sister Thea Bowman was with me the entire time because she had been in that space before. Yet what happens is what we always do. We rise to the occasion, right? And we knew that we had a cloud of witnesses with us, alongside us, sitting there in that chair next to us, surrounding us in love and support. And we do our work. Before I went to Rome, I went to a wise woman who is sitting right here and said, I'm having a little imposter syndrome. And she listened to me very patiently and then said, the Pope chose you, your bishop chose you, get to work. Enough said. And so I think the opportunities is for women to discern how to use their gifts, skills, and talents. How does your love for God merge with your love for justice? To ask the question, what is mine to do now, and to get to work.
Thank you for that. There's so much work to be done. I mean, we're here talking about this because we're talking about how best to advance the common good, how best to live out Catholic social teaching and our social mission and our mission to love God and our neighbor in our life. And I think women's contributions to that, we're all here to talk about how we can most fully realize them. Anne, I want to talk to you now, turn to you. You've been covering the Vatican for NBC News now for years. You've reported on many of the changes in Rome that have allowed for greater participation for women in the Church's institutional leadership, and many of the challenges as well. You also serve on the Board of Trustees of Notre Dame, and in that way you've both observed and participated in leadership in some of the Church's most major institutions. So how has the leadership of women in the Church changed over that time, especially in the way women contribute to the Church's outward-facing mission?
It is slowly getting better. I mean, like every parish that I went to, women were the backbone of the parish. They did the work. If something was put on in the parish, you can guarantee it was all the women that did the work. Didn't necessarily get the credit, but they're the ones that did the work. I think it's like anything else. It evolves over time. I'm sure everyone in this room, including myself, has been the one in the room where you are looked at for the women's point of view or whatever, and you're surrounded. Cynthia, when you said how you felt so scared at the synod, when I went to my first class at Notre Dame, I was the only girl in the class, and I'm like, what am I doing here? Because I was the fourth class of women to go all the way through at Notre Dame after it went co-ed. And so that was an adjustment at Notre Dame, and I can just look at Notre Dame and watch how back then there were no women on the Board of Trustees. There are now probably a third of the board are women. Their voices are welcomed, they're respected, and that change has taken 50 years, 50 plus years, but change comes, and it is that work. It is what you said, you put your nose down, you do your work, and that change happens. And that is what excites me about where we are, because if we continue to work, or women continue to work, they will be recognized, because you have leaders now who are willing to recognize the work of women and who value the work of women. That's the other thing you need.
That's a big change that we could see. Tell me a little bit more, I guess, about your Catholic upbringing, Anne, and what in that led you to lead a life focused on advancing the common good in your vocation, and what elements of your leadership you draw from from what you've experienced as a woman in the Church growing up and now.
I go back to my parents. I grew up outside of Boston, and my parents were very involved in parish life. They ran fashion shows, and they ran dinner dances and communion breakfasts, and at St. James the Great in Natick and St. John the Evangelist in Wellesley Hills. And then at the Catholic school I went to called the Academy of the Assumption. And it is their example, because they were serving the Church. They had this wonderful friend group who they were all part of it. And they were doing something beyond themselves. And I always wanted that. By the time I graduated from Notre Dame and got out into the real world, parish life was very different. And I have never found that replicated in all the moves I have made. Instead, for me now, my parish is Notre Dame. that is where I can serve. I can serve this institution that gave me a tremendous education that I would put up against anyone. I believe in their mission to be a force for good. I can also practice and nurture my faith. I never wanted to cover the Catholic Church, quite frankly. This was not something I was ever interested in, because the other thing, the way my parents raised me, was that your faith was something that was private. You didn't go out and shout that you were Catholic, and especially back then when they grew up, it was not a popular thing to be. But what happened for me was when the sex abuse scandal broke in Boston, and I was covering business and finance for NBC at the time, Catholic charities took a nosedive. I mean, just their funds dried up. And if you know, Catholic Charities is the great social safety net, along with Lutheran Social Services, underneath the government safety net. And without Catholic Charities, there would be a lot, people would really be hurting, even they're hurting spiritually in the Archdiocese at that time. They would really be hurting. And my mom knew the man who was at the time, who was head of Catholic Charities. And so she told me about this story, and I pitched it to the people at NBC, and they said, sure, go do it. And then they liked the way I did it, because I could explain the faith to people, and that's essentially what I'm charged to do. And so I slogged through those years, and then when Pope Francis was elected, it was such a breath of fresh air, because we stopped focusing on the culture war issues, and we focused on Jesus' message of mercy and compassion. And that ignited the world. I think really captured the world's attention. And I got lucky and got to travel with him 5 times on the papal plane and go elsewhere around the world as he brought his message of hope. And I think that has been, for me, that has been a great personal and professional joy, to be able to experience that, but also to be able to tell that story. And it's not, covering the news about the Catholic Church, it's not always wonderful, but to be able to explain it to people so they can appreciate it, even if they are not Catholic, is very important. That's what I strive to do.
And it's a wonderful, wonderful service. And I think, again, this message of hope and joy that's at the heart of our faith, whether you're in a parish or whether you're on NBC News or traveling the world, I think is just central. So thank you. Sister Jane, I want to turn to you. You have watched, empowered, and been a key part of the work and of the leadership of women religious around the world, responding to so many needs of the vulnerable in our society. And Pope Francis said, often, in many ways, I'll say one expression of it. He said, I prefer a church which is bruised, hurting, and dirty because it's been out on the streets, rather than a church which is unhealthy from being confined and from clinging to its own security. I see the church as a field hospital after battle. I love that image. Tell us a little bit about the work of Catholic sisters and what you're doing around the world, and in particular, what inspires women religious to do this work serving the vulnerable? How do they respond to this image of the work of the church as a field hospital?
Thank you, Kim. I have been able to travel to so many countries, and one common denominator I've seen about Catholic sisters or women religious is love, commitment, and giving themselves for the common good. Go to the tea farms in India, where not even anyone knows that Catholic sisters are there. Go deeper in Ukraine, where conflict is raging. They are there. Go to South Sudan, where it's very difficult. They are there. And in our encounter, one thing that settles in my heart, and all of you can resonate, is the Gospel of Luke chapter 4, verse 8. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because God has anointed me to bring good news to the poor, bring healing to those who are ailing, liberty to captives, and restore the sight. And that's what Catholic sisters are doing every day in very remote regions. Just 2 weeks ago, when you respond about the field hospital, Sister Lucia Karam who lives in Barcelona, Spain, led in a humanitarian corridor 20 vehicle ambulances to Ukraine. They were carrying medicine, other health equipment, and they brought all those equipment to Ukraine. And she returned in that convoy with people who were ill, children who needed surgery, and other people who needed help. That is a field hospital.
Absolutely.
When you look at how sisters are living, living the Catholic social teaching principles, elevating the dignity of the human person, preferential option for the poor, and walking in solidarity with those who are in the margins, that's how they express themselves and express the love and compassion God has invited them to. In the work of advocacy, we see in this country, whether it's in health, education, social services, sisters are there, spiritually accompanying those who need accompanying, helping them to restore their dignity to the fullness. I can speak of Uganda, Sister Rosemary Nyirumbe, who has been working with women who have returned from war. They don't know how to speak English. They are literally experiencing trauma. They accompany them to healing. Sister Nimalini in India, who is leading other women, and some of them who are here, Sister Karozin and others. Literally, Catholic sisters remain present and among the people. I was just in Mexico a few months ago, when every shelter closed because the US aid had been canceled. All 20 shelters closed, all those people moved to Kafamin shelter. And the sisters opened their door and said, looked at the people in their eyes. You need help, you need your dignity restored, you need to be accompanied, you need help. They embrace them. That's what the sisters do. And I think that's where the church is, because they are walking the journey with these individuals who are experiencing disadvantage in very, very difficult situations, but creating a pathway for them.
Talk about leadership in the church. I mean, I think you look at Catholic sisters and their work and the literal field hospital that work embodies around the world. And to me, that's leadership, that's servant leadership. And I know we're all so grateful for that work. Let me ask you to talk a little bit about how both your work as a Catholic sister and sort of looking at others, how has that changed over time, over the last decades? Like, what do you see as the same and what do you see as different now?
There are changes because also the needs of the society are quite different, but some have remained the same. Yeah. I am seeing more the sisters collaborating with each other and working for the common good. So it's not where it's only my congregation and this is the charism. They are living the charism of love. We have, from the Hilton Foundation where I work, we have created networks, over 110 of them. Whether it's the sisters who are aging and they need to be cared for, but also are caring for others that need support. The sisters are coming together. Regardless of St. Joseph, Franciscan, we are here to work together for the common good. So I see that happening a lot. Sisters, advocacy work. Sisters, look at the issue and say, we need to create an advocacy strategy here, organizing the community, rallying around those issues, where they are restoring the dignity of the human person. So I am seeing more sisters working together across the borders, but also welcoming the lay people. Let's work together towards solving the challenges of this particular community than where you just run a school or a hospital as only organization that you are focused on. But let's work together.
I love that, thank you. And when I think about lay people helping in their community, I think of you and your work, Joanna. You and others at the Coalition for Spiritual and Public Leadership have been at the forefront of efforts to recognize the dignity of undocumented people in the Chicago area, as well as advance efforts for justice around a range of other issues, of course. And you do so in a way that is deeply rooted in your community and makes use of the strength that already exists in community ties, and of course is deeply rooted in our faith as well. So what do women in particular bring to your organizing efforts, and what roles do women play in the community you work in, and how does that affect your work?
Thank you, Kim. I always say that I got into organizing because of my mom and her señora friends, who were very Catholic and also very involved in their unions. And despite working physically grueling jobs from 5 a.m. to 3 p.m., they still made time to go to meetings, marches, protests after work and on the weekends, and they would bring me. And what they modeled for me is this type of dedication that women have towards justice work. And I still see this type of unmatched dedication with the women who organize with CSPL. And I think about women like Tiffany and Lorena, two women of color who, despite working full-time jobs, still make it to every strategy and planning meeting. They MC our large events, they help execute these large actions of thousands of people, and they bring their community members along. And so, and the community goes because the community trusts them. So they're natural organizers. They know what it takes to move large groups of people to an action that's rooted in their values. And I think about how women play such a role in the smallest and largest of details in our organizing, whether it's emceeing or folding thousands of worship aids or registering people at our events. It's literally the women who make this possible. And they do this work because they believe in the work. And they do this work because they've also grown as leaders because of the work. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the pivotal role that Catholic sisters play in our organizing work. And I'm thinking about Sister Jeremy, Sister Kristen, Sister Licha, and so many more. Last year we had the privilege of attending the LCWR conference, the Leadership Conference of Women Religious, where Sister Carol is. It was amazing. It's hundreds of sisters discerning, strategizing, also dancing, which is beautiful to see. And when I came back to Chicago, I was sharing with Sister Mary McDonough, who's a 92-year-old Mercy sister, and I was showing her pictures, and I said, sister, at CSPL, we always say that Catholic sisters are the backbone of the church. And she looked at me and she said, oh, honey, we're the heartbeat too. I love that she said that because she's absolutely right. It was the Catholic sisters who first believed in CSPL and gave us our first grant. Through our Women Religious Council, anytime we're faced with a critical issue, we talk to them. Mm-hmm. They help shape strategy. Oh my God, the list goes on. And so when I think about what women bring to our organizing, I could be here all night because the work wouldn't be possible without them.
Thank you for that, and thank you for your work and leadership. I want to turn now to a recent lawsuit that CSPL filed against the Trump administration because your members had been prevented from providing pastoral care at the Broadview Detention Facility. In thinking about this case, how does grassroots organizing help to realize and develop the leadership among women in this pastoral care and elsewhere?
Yeah, thank you, Kim. First, I would mention that we only have a lawsuit because of the courageous leadership of Sister Joanne Persh and Sister Pat Murphy, two Mercy sisters who, for 2.5 years, engaged in civil disobedience, prayed rosaries, never took no for an answer, and fought to be allowed inside of the Broadview ICE facility to administer pastoral care, which they finally won in 2008. And since winning access, they were allowed in on Fridays, every Friday at 4 a.m., despite the weather, and you all know how grueling Chicago weather can be. But they went because they wanted to provide some type of consolation and mercy to our detained siblings during such a traumatic time. And during Operation Midway Blitz, during the ICE raids in Chicago last fall, all of that changed. They shut down access, they were tear gassing protesters, there were inhumane conditions inside, and so we discerned we wanted to bring pastoral care inside to say the church stands with you and to affirm their dignity. And so in October, we held a Eucharistic procession where we had 1,000 Catholics march with us to the Broadview ICE facility, and ICE denied our entry. Then we came back again in November where we held a People's Mass on All Saints' Day, on Dia de Muertos, where we brought 2,000 people with us. And this time, Sister Joanne Persh was a part of the delegation. And ICE denied us entry again. And it was after that Mass that 2 Catholic lawyers came up to us and said, you have, we want to represent you, you have a ruling here. And, you know, Sister Joanne Peirce was originally one of the plaintiffs of the lawsuit. And in her declaration, she wrote 10 years of everything that had happened inside of that facility. And when she signed and submitted her declaration, she died a few hours later at the hospital, which is just like, she did so much in terms of her legacy, and then that was one of the last things that she did on earth. And so it was because of their dedication and their bravery that we have any prior legal precedent. And so I know they're still working overtime in heaven and interceding for us. And you know, I would also be telling a very different story if I said that 50 or 100 people came to our actions, but thousands of people came. Thousands of Catholics came, and that's largely because of the women who brought dozens and hundreds of people with them. And I think about Irma from Our Lady of Mount Carmel, who created an entire system to bring her parish out. And as a Catholic immigrant woman, Irma played a central role in all of these actions. And she told me, you know, when you all like my ideas and you like my suggestions, it makes me feel like I have this incredible strength inside of me, like I'm King Kong, even though I'm so short. And for reference, Irma's like, comes up to here to me. So she's like very, very short. And it was at Irma's parish that we had the Ash Wednesday Mass and procession where 3,500 people came. And earlier that day, our delegation was granted access inside of the Broadview ICE facility. And so I think about the power of organizing and how it draws out these natural gifts in women. And it could be one woman organizing or 2 Catholic sisters organizing. And the fruits of their labor will still be felt for decades and centuries to come.
Thank you for that. Thanks so much. Cynthia, I'm going to turn to you now. You were a leader, one of the U.S. delegates in the Synod in Solidarity, which was Pope Francis' signature effort at spiritual renewal and structural reform of the church. So a leader at the global level, and you're also a leader at the parish level in Minneapolis in your community. And I know that your parish is a vital part of the social fabric of the broader community, which has, like Chicago, also suffered greatly in recent months and years. So what role do women leaders at the parish level play in this broader community in responding to the challenges you have? And how does the life of your parish enrich and support the broader life of the city of Minneapolis and St. Paul, the region, the Twin Cities region?
Thanks for the question. So I love this part because I get to talk about my parish. So what's important to know, one fact, we are within 2 miles of the murder site of George Floyd, the murder site of Renee Good, the murder site of Alex Preddy, and the shooting at Annunciation School, right in the heart of it. We also are lucky, very fortunate to have 2 priests who believe that women are the image of Christ. I'm the Adult Learning Director, female, Finance Director, female, Peace and Justice, female, Youth Ministry, female, Faith Formation, female, Liturgy for the Family, female, Communications Director, female. And we have been empowered to use our gifts and our talents and our skills to serve from a place of love and compassion. Our motto is, we welcome you wherever you are in your journey. We have over 200 zip codes, and we try to live into that mission and motto every day. When George Floyd died, the city of Minneapolis and St. Paul really came together in terms of resistance and in terms of taking care of each other. And it wasn't just a Catholic community or a Jewish community, it was all of us working together. Minnesota Council of Churches came together, we created coalitions, so we made a foundation and continued all of these years to journey with each other, to work together, to build partnerships. So when ICE came to Minneapolis and St. Paul, we were ready. And so everybody activated their coalitions, their partnerships, ramped up their ministries, and got to work. we have some incredible, we're known as a social justice parish, and we have so many ministries that we have that serve those who are on the margins. And so we ramped up all of those ministries. I am responsible for the spiritual foundation of our volunteers and our staff. And so my piece was to make sure that we're always grounded and try to be as much as possible in God, in our relationship with God. And then we add that, and that's how we go out and serve. So we make sure that we're serving from the right place, the correct place of God's mission and love for all, and we don't cause harm to ourselves or others. So we spent a lot of time putting together those two pieces, love for God and love for justice, and to make sure we're serving from that centered place of healing, reconciliation, and gratitude and joy. So during Lent, we're doing things like starting all our masses with breath work and silence to bring ourselves together in community, grounded in that spiritual space, and then discern together how to go out and serve.
I love that. Thank you very much for that. And you can see how important it is for your community, for your parish, for the broader region, that this work is happening and it's rooted in love of God, love of neighbor. I wonder, can you tell us a little bit more about bringing that experience, that parish level experience, to the broader global effort of the Synod, for instance, or broader efforts in the church? Why is it important that there is that relationship? And can you talk a little bit about your experience there?
Sure. When George Floyd was murdered, the World Council of Churches contacted the Minnesota Council of Churches and said, for the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity in 2023, we want it written through the lens of racial justice. And the Catholic Church is not a member of the World Council of Churches, but we partner with them. And so the Vatican called our archdiocese and said, we need a representative of the Catholic Church for the US. And he picked up my cell phone and called me, his cell phone and called me. So I got to work with the Dicastery of Faith on that and Christian Unity, and there were 7 churches within the Minneapolis, St. Paul areas, all of different denominations working on that document. So that was one way I got drawn in, which led to work with the continental stage of the Synod and then the global Synod. We have been known for a long time, although we do have some history. There was a time that St. Joan of Arc, early on in the 40s, was a Catholic parish. And within Minneapolis, we had one Catholic parish for Black people and one Catholic parish in St. Paul for Black people. And those were the only 2 we could go to. And St. John's was not one of them. And so we had a parish person, a member, who wanted to send her children to the school, and they turned her down. And so we have that history, and once that was rectified, we decided we needed apparently to do something different. And so our focus is to be consistent and recognize that that is the mission of the church and that is the mission of us, that we are all sacred and made in the image and likeness of God. And so we have that reputation, we do that work, so we have the foundation to do the work that needed to be done during this time with ICE. We just, as we say, we put our head down, ramp it up, and do the work.
That's wonderful. I think it's so interesting, right, to see parishes around the world who are involved so much at their local level, serving those in need, serving the vulnerable, and also involved at the global level. And you realize that the church is just this global institution, this network of networks where we're all ultimately striving for, again, love of God, love of neighbor. Thank you for that.
Just one quick thing. I was in California a couple of months ago doing some preaching over the weekend at an African-American parish. And I got there on a Friday, and it just so happened that they are a member of 10 churches, all denominations, that would get together every Friday and have a prayer service for Minnesota.
Wow.
So it was just amazing. And that I didn't realize how much I needed that energy and that joy and that hope until I got there. But that was a gift for me.
The body
to
of
keep going.
Christ, right? That's
Yep.
wonderful. Thank you. I think we're now going to turn to, we've had such a rich discussion here. I want to turn to audience questions. So we have our team members in the audience with microphones. Please raise your hand if you have a question and we'll bring you a microphone. And let's go ahead and get started. Who wants to help us out? Go ahead, right here. And please stand up and identify yourself. And I'm going to say our founder, we'll go ahead and stand up. I'm going to say our founder, John Carr, had a wonderful line. He used to say, please ask your question in the form of a question. So we'll go. Thanks, go ahead.
I promise it's a question. My name is Amelia. I'm an alum of Georgetown, and thank you so much for coming to Georgetown. Thank you for bringing your voices. That was a comment. My question.
That's welcome.
My question is, I really wonder what hopes you carry kind of in the tenderest places for gender equity in the Catholic Church, in terms of leadership. Do you hope for women to become priests? And if so, what observations have landed with you that make you think that there might be kinetic rather than potential energy for change? Or what else does gender equity in the Catholic Church look like to you?
So what do you hope for? What do you hope for? What else does gender equity look like? Does anybody want to start off with that? Anne?
I would love to hear Cynthia preach.
Cynthia?
Yes. I think, that's one of the things that you realize when you start hearing from lay people and hearing from lay women, that you have such wonderful thoughts and expressions and hopes. Why aren't we hearing that at Mass? I think we should be hearing that at Mass. I don't think that depends on whether you have 2 X chromosomes or an X and Y chromosome. It's what's in your heart and your soul, and that's a beautiful thing.
Thank you very much for that, Anne. Other, Sister Jane?
I would add, Isaiah encourages me. I am building something new. It's time it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? At least we are on a journey. We have women in leadership at the Vatican when there were none a few years ago through Pope Francis. But also our preaching through the action of the work I see the Catholic sisters doing in the margin speaks louder in action and helping to raise people and support people. And specifically, I would share a story. I was in India last year, and I've been there quite a few times, but this story stuck with me. A young girl, Felicia, married at 13. Experienced lots of domestic violence and abuse. At 18, she was divorced with 3 children.
Oh.
She did not have anywhere to turn. The sisters encountered her as she was coming from Red Light District. They held her with her 3 children. They encouraged her. And she had to go through trauma healing, psychological support. Then they asked her, what has been your dream in life? And she said, I have always dreamed to become a beautician so that I can make women look beautiful. And for me, that is the hope that we should all hold. No is not an answer. No is to tell you, think differently and take a detour. If there is any preaching, it is that preaching. Now Felicia has an apartment, her children are in school, and she has a job, just within a span of 9 months. Wow. If each one of us in the Catholic Church can do that, what a world would we create?
Thank you very much for that. How our actions show the living Christ in the world. Thank you very much. Other questions out here? Go ahead. And a microphone from Anna.
Hi, my name is Trish O'Connor. I'm a parishioner at Holy Trinity Parish down the street. And my question is this. What I've noticed or been reading, that it appears that more young people are engaged in going to Mass and being together as a community. And I wonder if, in fact, that is true. And if it is, how can we keep them engaged and excited and enthused to be participants in the church?
Great question, thank you. I wonder, Cynthia, what you're singing in your parish, and maybe Joanna, your reaction too.
So this is the largest OCIA class we've had in quite some time, and that falls under my responsibilities. And we have the youngest, I think, is 21, and the oldest is 88.
Wow.
And we have 13 baptisms coming up. So it's an absolutely amazing thing. I'm sorry, 13 confirmations coming up. What I'm seeing is that with our youth ministry, we really empower them to participate in all aspects of the church. And so we have peer ministers. We have 2 of our students this year led walkouts at their high school during the resistance of ICE. And so we really instill in them the confidence and the responsibility to serve, and we accompany them as they do so. There's a lot of energy right now between our young adults. We've just renewed our young adults group, and there's a lot of energy because we've basically said, that falls under me too. And I finally have said, you know, I have big thoughts on what are some of the things you could be doing, but what do you want to do? And come back to me in 2 months and let me know, and then let's go from there. So now we have about 26 people that are starting out together. They've divided it up in how they want to do it. And I think when I think about our children and our young adults at this point, these years have been rough for them, just really rough. And so how do we make sure they have what they need? And the best way I know how to do that is to ask them and then deliver.
What a lesson from the Synod, right, is to listen. Thank you. How about you, Joanna? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I do see a lot more university students getting involved. And I think the gift that organizing brings is that it invites, encourages, and challenges young people to be protagonists in their world and in their church, and to learn the hard skills of discerning, strategizing, and executing campaigns, which could also then be translated to the parish level. And so I do see a surge of university students participating more and more, and now we're working with the seminary to get involved as well.
Thank you. Wonderful. I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Jane Varner-Malhotra. I'm a Georgetown graduate alum, and I'm actually asking this question on behalf of my daughter, who lives in Minneapolis and works in criminal justice reform. And I'm just wondering how we can hold our institutions accountable, particularly around the ICE violence that's going on, and Hilton Hotels, who's a great funder of Catholic work, but is also housing federal ICE agents in Minneapolis. So how do we, balance that?
Thank you. Cynthia?
It's a challenge. Although we have one of the most incredible resistance organizations, the Singing Resistance, who have been known to be out there at 2 o'clock in the morning singing to them as they are trying to sleep. So there's all kinds of ways to display our displeasure and to show resistance. And we're always trying to work within the law, but we do not shy away from being present for what we know is right.
Anybody else? Anne? Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on how thinking about holding, I feel like journalists hold institutions accountable all the time. Can you talk a little bit about that too?
That's our role, is that when you see something that happens and that appears to be, I would say appears to be wrong, you hold those people accountable. And I think that what we have seen in Minneapolis, and I watched it from New York City, is that you saw local citizens holding ICE accountable for their actions, not just for Alex and Renee, but Liam, the little boy who was taken from his home, I'm going to mispronounce it, the Hmong man who was taken out of his house in his underwear. I mean, just things that we would never think that we would see in this country, because we are a country of laws and there are procedures as to how you do things. And when you see those procedures violated or not followed, then it's up to us in the media to point that out, and even more important for the citizens who are impacted to say this is wrong. And I think that's been one of the great stories of Minneapolis in the last couple of months, is to watch how you've done that.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I wonder, we're going to have one time for one more comment from everybody. And I think I want to talk about, and maybe we'll start with you, Cynthia, and we'll go down. For the young women in the audience here today, where do you see women's leadership going in the coming years? And how can they exercise that leadership right now?
So Pope Francis used to always talk about the Holy Spirit, the protagonist, use that word. And most of the time we have the understanding that, the protagonist is for us to get other people to do other things, but it's also for us to have the Holy Spirit working in us. And so what we encourage the young people to do is to discern what is yours to do based upon your gifts and skills and talents and what God is helping you discern, and go out and do that work and do it with joy. And know that there's a balance of that spiritual life that has to be the grounding and the action that goes with it. And know that if you have to step aside, someone else will step up. It's their turn to step up. They will step aside and someone else. To trust in that. And that keeps you from being burnt out and allows you to serve from a place where you cause no harm. So that's really important. And we try to make sure that young people who are so drawn to doing justice work to begin with, that we help formate them in a way so they're doing it in a way that's loving and healing and not harming to themselves or others.
Thank you. How about you, Joanna?
Yeah, I see women leading more front and center in ecclesial structures. I do believe we're going to see women deacons in my lifetime. I just believe it in my bones. And to the young women here, I would invite you to learn your history, learn the true history of the women who came before you and played a key role in shaping our faith and our world. And I would say, if something doesn't exist, go start it with a few friends. Speak up, take up space, and be like Sister Joanne Persh and Sister Pat Murphy and never take no as an answer. If they say you can't do something, you absolutely can. Because in 2015 and 2016, when I was sharing this idea of Catholic-rooted organizing and CSPL, it was several men who would scoff at me and say, that's not possible. And now I'm here talking about our work, so yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
How about you, Sister Jane? When I think of someone who can't, you don't take no for an answer. And the good work that you've done around the world with Catholic sisters, what do you say to young women out there?
Actually, I remember my mother. I was very young, and we were just dialoguing, and I needed something. And she sent me and she said, go to such and such a place and ask. And I said, Mom, no, I cannot go there. And she said, there will only be two answers. No, and that's not your problem. If the person is able to open the door and they have said no, that's not your problem, it's their problem.
I like that.
If they say yes, you are welcome. Go on and do what you have to do. She added a third point. When you find a load broke, it doesn't mean that you cannot go to where you need to go. It only tells you, take a different direction to get where you're going, or take a detour. You remember the three wise men? They took a detour in order to see the Messiah. So for the young women out there is time. Be patient, persist, and keep knocking. The door will open at some point, and it will be joy for all of us. 50 years ago, we never thought we would have a Sister Natalie Sister Alessandra, Sister Simona Brabiria. We never thought. So our times we are living in a different times. So keep waiting and do what you can do to the best of your abilities. Sister Nina, as I was talking with her, after she was appointed, she said, I never saw this coming. I was just doing my work, working with the Pentecost Project. And do your work. Someone will notice and will open the door for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Open the door. How about you, Anne? What do you say to young women here in the audience?
I would say, don't wait to be asked. If you see a need and you think you can help, do it. And then you will find that people will, as you do the work, people will take notice and they will want the gifts you have to offer. But I think the biggest problem women often miss, the mistake, at least my generation made, was that we waited to be asked. Don't wait to be asked, just go and do it. Because the church needs you, and they need your passion, they need your love, they need your heart.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Anne. Before we finish up here tonight, I want to preview two dialogues that we have coming next week. And the first is a special lunchtime conversation at 12:30 next Tuesday on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day in Riggs Library, with our own Chris White, the Associate Director of the initiative and the biographer of Pope Leo, as well as Austin Ivory, the biographer of Pope Francis. And they're going to be talking about Pope Francis, Pope Leo, continuity, change, and the conclave that elected a U.S. Pope. And then next Wednesday night, March 18th, in Dahlgren Chapel, we're hosting a Dahlgren dialogue with our colleagues in Georgetown's Office of Mission and Ministry on faith, democracy, and the common good, lessons from John Courtney Murray, S.J. The conversation will feature Vince Rougeau, the president of the College of the Holy Cross, Rob Vischer, the president of the University of St. Thomas, Kathy Caveney from Boston College, and again, our own Cardinal Robert McElroy of Washington, D.C. It should be a tremendous conversation. So you can find more information on these dialogues and resources about our conversation here on our website, and this discussion will be posted there as well. We hope that those of you in person can join us for a reception here in the back of the room. We'd love to have you stay and talk. And I want to thank everyone who helped put this evening together, especially Optimum Audio, our AV team, and everybody on the wonderful Initiative on Catholic Social Thought and Public Life team, including my colleagues Kim, Chris, Anna, Michaela, Christian, Blaine, Luke, and Neil, and our colleague emeritus John Carr, who is with us in the audience here tonight. Thank you, everyone, for your support and for helping make this evening such a success. Thank you for joining us here at Georgetown and online, and please join me in thanking our wonderful panel here tonight.